Good morning, everyone. This is Michele Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. I have a guest today that I've been talking to for over a year now, and I have to tell you a little backstory about Dr. Nathan Bryan because he's such a special man, and this will indicate what I'm or validate what I'm talking about. So I was at the Radfest Festival in Anaheim about a year or so ago, and I walked over to the booth called N101 and Nitric Oxide. If anyone has heard of nitric oxide, you know that that's a big hot topic these days. So I was really interested because of my podcast to meet Dr. Bryan. And anyway, it turned out by just good fortune, Susan, his partner, was there, and then Dr. Bryan came by. And so we started chatting, and I mean, I was just so engaged in all that he's done. So today, we're going to hear his backstory on how he got to where he is today, and we're going to hear all about deep dive into nitric oxide. But the story I was going to tell you is that, so I needed a ride to Los Angeles, and I happened to mention to Dr. Bryan that I was going up to LA and right away he offered me a ride with flying back to the going back to the airport to fly back to home. So I was just so impressed that here was a complete stranger, and here he was so generous to offer that. It turned out my schedule changed and we didn't do it. And I actually regret that because I think I would have learned an awful lot in that 1 hour, just having him one-on-one outside of a conference. But anyway, it just shows you the generosity of Nathan Bryan. And actually, I like him so much that I have him in September, but it won't come out until October 1st. He'll be the feature column in my Top Doctor magazine. So I do a monthly column there. So if you are listening to this podcast or watching it today, please check out topdoctor.com and you'll see another piece on Dr. Bryan. So good morning, Nathan. How are you?
Well, great. It's great to see you. I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Good to see you. I'm doing great. Are you in Austin today?
I am. I'm home for the next couple of days. I live about an hour outside of Austin, but I just flew in from Miami yesterday and head to New York next week.
Yeah, you're on an airplane a lot.
Every week.
Nathan, nitric oxide has become one of the darlings of the longevity movement, and a lot of people, however, I'm shocked, haven't really understood or even know about it. So why don't we start first with how did you get so engaged in an area that is still emerging and evolving as a longevity. I don't even want to say a biohack because it really is a scientific breakthrough that people haven't really understood. So it's kind of like inflammation was for many years. If you remember when they first started talking about inflammation, everybody poo-pooed it in the medical world, and then suddenly it became this, very important part of the three-legged stool of health, right?
That's right.
I think nitric oxide might be the fourth leg. So let's start in the beginning. So what is it that brought you to this awareness of something that's so important and so young at such a young age?
Well, that takes me back almost 30 years, Michele.
Yeah, I know. And you're not that old. So okay, so 30 years means early 1990s.
Yeah, the late 90s. Yeah, late 90s, early 2000s.
Oh, late 90s. I'm sorry.
Late 90s. Yeah, so I was a student at LSU School of Medicine. I was working on a PhD in molecular cellular physiology, and a Nobel Prize had just been awarded for the discovery of nitric oxide. And honestly, I had a degree in biochemistry from the University of Texas at Austin, so I was familiar with nitrogen-based chemistries. Obviously, nitric oxide part of the nitrification, denitrification cycle. But it was a new molecule in science or medicine. But obviously, it was important because the Nobel Prize had just been awarded for the discovery of nitric oxide as a signaling molecule in the cardiovascular system. And during my PhD work, I was working under a pharmacologist who became my mentor, Martin Feelish, who had worked in the nitric oxide field for, since the early 80s, and when it was just first starting to be discovered. And so I had a chance to meet Lou Ignarro, who had just won the Nobel Prize, and piqued my interest. It was an exciting time, and nitric oxide is this gas that's when it's produced, it's gone in less than a second. So we didn't have a lot of analytical tools to measure nitric oxide production in animals, in humans, So part of my PhD was developing these analytical methods where we could detect nitric oxide. And when nitric oxide is produced, where does it go and what does it become and how does it signal? Because once it's produced, it's gone in less than a second. So, we started trying to figure this out through these nitric oxide analytical methods that we'd developed. And we understood the metabolism of nitric oxide, how it's produced. When it's produced, where does it go? What does it become? And how does it signal? And then how do we detect nitric oxide deficiencies in many different diseases, from diabetes to heart disease to transplantation surgery? And so then we were armed, our group was armed with really a lot of tools that no one else in the world had. I finished my PhD in less than 2 years. I think I published 2 or 3 first author papers during that time, and then went to Boston Medical Center and was training in cardiovascular as a postdoctoral fellow. And then Fred Murad, the other guy who won the Nobel Prize, recruited me to join faculty of UT Medical School in Houston. And I believe that was 2005, so 20 years ago, where I started my own independent research career. And, so again, continued our journey of discovery and innovations, and, started filing patents. Patents became issued, and then started making products and starting companies. And
well,
later.
I did watch Blue on a TV, on an internet show. I don't know if it's a podcast, but anyway, is he still with you today? I mean, do you collaborate with him?
No, Lou is a close friend and colleague, and he's the only remaining surviving member of the Nobel laureates. But yeah, no, look, I'm hosting the Nitric Oxide Society meeting in Austin in April of next year, and Lou's our keynote. Lou's part of the organizing committee, so he's still active. He's still very active in the nitric oxide community. He's such a wonderful, caring, humble man, and really supportive of new investigators, and he's been a champion in the field.
I was just about to say to you, he was so humble that he didn't even, when he was asked about his background, he didn't even mention the Nobel Prize. And the interviewer had to say, well, you're omitting one very, very important piece of information. So yeah, he had to pull it out of him. I mean, that just shows you his humility. So what has happened from then to now in terms of the scientific awareness of the importance of nitric oxide? That's, it's 30 years. So what has transpired?
Well, today we understand how the human body makes nitric oxide. We understand what leads to a loss of its production. We understand the symptoms that develop as a loss of nitric oxide, as a result of the loss of nitric oxide production. And most importantly, we know how to overcome and fix and repair and recapitulate nitric oxide production and signaling. So, I like to say those guys discovered that nitric oxide is a signaling molecule in the cardiovascular system. But it was really the work of me and my research group who discovered how to deliver nitric oxide gas. Mm-hmm. So we make a solid dose form of nitric oxide gas. We can deliver this in an outpatient setting. We do this through consumer products and supplements and nutritionals and skincare products. We're developing drug therapy, which was my original kind of goal when I started in academia and medicine, was to understand the mechanism of disease to the extent that you could start to develop rational therapies. And that's what we're doing. We've got drugs in development for heart disease, we've got drugs in development for Alzheimer's and dementia, make a topical drug for diabetic ulcers and non-healing wounds. And that's just the start, because now what we know, it's not what we think, it's what we know, that there's not a single condition or disease indication where nitric oxide at the right dose, at the right time, in the right patient would not be beneficial. And so the future of medicine, health, wellness, human optimization is absolutely dependent upon adequate production of nitric oxide. And we know how to do it better than anybody in the world, and that's what we're doing.
When you say we, what do you mean?
We mean collectively. I never say I. Many of the patents I'm on, I'm the sole inventor on these patents, but it's a team. I had when I was in academia, I had research fellows, I had postdocs, I had faculty and staff that worked with me in collaboration. So I never take credit for this solely. And then when I say we now, I have several companies. And so there's executives within the companies, there's collaborators, there's clinical trial sites that run our clinical trials. So I never say I, because it's just not part of my fabric.
Yeah, no, that's also showing your humility. Well, so Nathan, why is it that it took so long for this to become something that people are now much more aware of? What do you think has been the reason that it's been slowed down, even with a Nobel Prize back in the late 90s?
Well, I think there's several reasons. Number one, on average, it takes about 17 years for new discoveries to become so-called standard of care or mainstream.
Correct.
Nitric oxide is only about a 50-year-old molecule. It was first described in 1977, Fred Murad's paper, showing that organic nitrates like nitroglycerin are metabolized into nitric oxide, and then that leads to vasodilation. That's how these drugs work for angina. And then in 1980, it was discovered by Bob Furchgott that the cells along our blood vessels produce this nitric oxide molecule. So that was the initial lag. It just takes time. It has to stand the test of time, and for these experiments to be reproducible by other groups. And then the other big, I think, lag in acceptance is there's been no major developments or innovations in nitric oxide drug therapy. When I started in the field in the late 90s, every big pharmaceutical company and biotech company had a nitric oxide pipeline of drugs. But the reason they failed was they were using the wrong target. They were using the wrong strategy. And they were putting nitric oxide linker molecules or nitric oxide active drugs on parent molecules like COX-2 inhibitors or aspirin or NSAIDs. And you have to cleave that nitroester bond, and there's consequences to that. So these drugs weren't safe. And then in the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s, it was started to develop nitric oxide therapy for inhalative therapy for premature babies born with pulmonary hypertension. Mm-hmm. So now clinically, that's been used for more than 30 or 40 years and saved millions of babies' lives that are born premature. But then that's where the clinical innovation really stopped, because nitric oxide is a gas. How do we create a solid dose form of nitric oxide that we can deliver in an outpatient setting? Mm-hmm. That's really the riddle that I solved, because my patents are on a method of making a solid dose form of nitric oxide gas. Mm-hmm. So we deliver nitric oxide either topically through our orals or through an orally disintegrating tablet or other technologies we have. And the whole basis of what I do is if your body can't make nitric oxide, then we got to give it for you, right? It's a hormone. It's like estrogen and testosterone. So if men or women can't make testosterone or estrogen respectively, we give them testosterone. We give them the actual molecule. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is we give nitric oxide gas, where all of the companies out there can't do this. They don't do it. And so their products don't work.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Water and Wellness. Water and Wellness is one of the best companies to find purified water. They have a countertop system that I use, and I travel with it all the time. So I would highly recommend you look at that. If you use the Ageless code, you'll get a 10% discount. waterandwellness.com/pages/Ageless and Timeless. That's how you can order to get the discount. So visit waterandwellness.com or call 877-296-6880 to learn how to take control of your drinking water and learn about all those natural additives to optimize your health and longevity.
Because we're never deficient in arginine or citrulline, and we're not deficient in a dead beet powder. So taking these products is not going to help in nitric oxide production.
I think that's very important what you just said, because a lot of people I know take L-arginine and they forget to take the L-citrulline with it. But even what you're just saying is if you're taking both of those, doing it, the combo, it's still not going to produce the nitric oxide that you can produce.
Well, that's because they don't understand the biochemistry. And that's why these companies are really doing their customers a disservice. And they're killing an industry. They're killing the nitric oxide field because these products don't work. And then the consumer or the patient goes, well, nitric oxide must not be that important because these products didn't help me. But look, the enzyme that converts arginine to nitric oxide is broken. And furthermore, L-citrulline is a byproduct of nitric oxide production. It is not a precursor.
Right.
But for me, it's an easy litmus test. If you're looking for products in your supplement store and that product has L-arginine or L-citrulline in it, then just dismiss it. Because the people who are selling you that product do not understand the basic biochemistry and enzymology of how nitric oxide is produced. So that's an easy litmus test. So save your money, put the product back on the shelf.
And then what sorry to interrupt, but what about if you added glutathione, if you did a transdermal glutathione, because I know glutathione is very difficult to absorb otherwise, maybe through IVs, but it's only short-lived. So let's just say you're doing an absorbable glutathione, which is a very rare thing to find. Does that help the L-arginine and L-citrulline and with glutathione added to produce more of a nitric oxide result? Or is
not
that
necessarily? No, not necessarily, because here's the problem. The nitric oxide synthase enzyme is what we call a homodimer. So it's two twins that come together.
Okay.
These enzymes have to undergo a conformational change to transfer the electrons from arginine to make nitric oxide. Then it spits out citrulline as a byproduct.
Okay.
The rate limiting step in the uncoupling of that enzyme
Okay.
is oxidation of tetrahydrobiopterin. So more glutathione, more antioxidant capacity. But just by increasing glutathione doesn't prevent oxidation of tetrahydrobiopterin. There's a different redox potential for glutathione than ascorbic acid, than alpha lipoic acid, than tetrahydrobiopterin to all other antioxidants, whether fat soluble, water soluble, enzymatic antioxidants. There's a redox potential that's required to prevent the extraction of electron from all those molecules. So the simple answer is maybe, but not necessarily.
Right. So basically what you're saying, Nathan, is if you have an L-arginine, even if you've added the L-citrulline and you're doing a combo, forget about it. It's not going to do what the manufacturers are.
Look, because there's very defined biochemistry, right? There's what we call the Michaelis constant. And this may get too technical, but I think it's a very important concept. There's a certain concentration of a molecule that's required to theoretically saturate 50% of the binding sites to activate that enzymatic reaction. The Michaelis constant for L-arginine is 5 micromolar. Even the sickest of sickest people, we've got 100 to 200 micromolar. What does that mean? We have 20 to 40 times excess L-arginine than what's needed to bind to the enzyme to make nitric oxide. We're never deficient in L-arginine. It's a semi-essential amino acid. We get it from the breakdown of protein, whether it's animal or plant protein, and we make it through the urea cycle. The partial urea cycle is present in every cell in the human body. And we're constantly making arginine, we're constantly making citrulline. We're never deficient in these amino acids, so it makes no sense to supplement. Why supplement something that you're not deficient in?
That you already have. So, Nathan, go back for a moment and just give everybody a very good, short and easy to understand definition beyond it being a molecular gas, but take us a little bit deeper to what is nitric oxide.
Well, it's a signaling molecule. It was first discovered to be a vasodilator. So when it's produced in the lining of the blood vessel, it relaxes the smooth muscle around the blood vessels, and it leads to vasodilation. So now we're getting increased oxygen nutrient delivery to downstream blood vessels. It's the signal that tells our own stem cells to mobilize. So if you have adequate nitric oxide, you have more stem cells in circulation on, autologous, our own stem cells. It activates an enzyme in our nucleus called telomerase, which prevents our telomeres from shortening. So shorter telomeres, shorter lifespan, longer telomeres, longer lifespan. And then the other important thing about longevity is it induces mitochondrial biogenesis, and it improves the efficiency of oxygen utilization to make cellular energy, or ATP. So if you think about that, if you can't make nitric oxide, you lose the regulation of blood flow, you develop ED, high blood pressure, insulin resistance, you have mitochondrial dysfunction, you have shorter telomeres, and you don't repair and replace dysfunctional cells because you don't have any stem cells in circulation. You want to lead to human optimization and biohacking and longer, healthier life free of disease. I mean, you have to start at nitric oxide. That is the foundation. There are other things you have to address, but without adequate oxide production, nothing else is going to optimize you.
And this is so compelling. And then that means that, adding all the other, the five-legged stool of a diet, nutrition and sleep and stress and all the things that go into a healthy lifestyle, that you actually, without nitric oxide, all of those things are not going to be nearly as effective, right? You need the nitric oxide, kind of like the foundation, like building a house. That's your foundation. Yeah.
And nitric oxide is not going to replace sleep. It's not going to replace, a good diet. I mean, it's a two-way street. If you have adequate nitric oxide production, you have good rest, you're going to improve nitric oxide production, improve stem cell mobilization, so you're going to rest and repair.
Right.
If you eat a poor diet, it's with high sugar, carbohydrates, and all that. It's going to continue to deplete your body of the ability to make nitric oxide. Taking nitric oxide products isn't going to help you. I mean, it will help you, but it's not going to. You still have to change your diet. and do the things that lead to better natural production of nitric oxide.
Right. So this is a collaboration, but it is something that is important to look at. So how do you get a baseline? How do you know what your nitric oxide level is if you're starting out on a nitric oxide journey?
Well, unfortunately, there's no biomarkers like blood labs we can draw and give you a number of your nitric oxide because, again, once it's produced, it's metabolized in different metabolites. We've done this for 25, 30 years in the research lab, but unfortunately, it's not done clinically. So what we do is we rely on symptoms. So the first sign and symptom to develop if your body becomes compromised in its ability to produce nitric oxide is erectile dysfunction. And this isn't just in male, it's in female. And if you think about it, to get an erection, either a penile or clitoral labral erection, we have to increase blood flow.
Blood flow. Yeah.
That engorgement. So we have to dilate the blood vessels. Nitric oxide dilates the blood vessels. If we can't make nitric oxide, we don't get vasodilation, we don't get engorgement. And that is erectile dysfunction. It's called the canary in the coal mine because it is the canary in the coal mine. Because if you have endothelial dysfunction in the vascular bed of your sex organs, that same dysfunction is occurring in your heart, in your brain, in your lungs, in your liver. It's a systemic disease that manifests first when we're trying to dilate the blood vessels on demand. And then number two, your blood pressure starts to go up because without adequate nitric oxide, now we've got the same volume of blood going through smaller blood vessels and pressure goes up. Number three, you start to get insulin resistance and metabolic disease. And 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically unhealthy. Number four, you can't maintain an exercise regimen because if you can't dilate the blood vessels to the heart or the skeletal muscle when you're exercising, you tire, you get lactic acid buildup, and you can no longer maintain that exercise regimen. And then number five, you start to get brain fog, mild cognitive impairment, dementia, and eventually Alzheimer's. So those are the things that you should pay attention on. And, the analogy I use is that our smartphones, when we look at our smartphone and we see the red light come on here that our battery's low, people panic. They go, oh shit, I got to charge my battery. Well, ED is your red light coming on, saying your battery's low. High blood pressure, insulin resistance, exercise intolerance, mild cognitive brain fog. That's your body telling you, hey, I need some nitric oxide. I'm getting low. And so pay attention. Your body's always talking to you. You just got to pay attention.
But yet, Nathan, if you're going to even a functional medicine doctor, how often, if they have these symptoms, are they going to tell someone to go get nitric oxide, talk to Dr. Bryan and go to N101, your company, and, start using the product? So, in your experience, are people that are in your world, in your wheelhouse, are they advocating that as a solution for those kinds of symptoms?
We're making some progress, but here's the problem. I mean, as this market is expanding and the awareness around nitric oxide is growing, more companies are coming in trying to sell a nitric oxide product.
Yes.
Doctors will recommend it because they've got salespeople in there. They hear a webinar or hear something and they go, well, let me try this nitric oxide product. Or I saw a commercial on TV. And then they say, well, take this B product and then come back. Well, their patient comes back and they go, well, this didn't help me. And then we lose the conversation. And it's not because nitric oxide didn't work for that patient. It's because that product did not, and will not ever produce nitric oxide in that patient because that product doesn't address the root cause of their deficiency because they're either ignorant, and ignorance is fine, it's just a lack of knowledge, or they're deceptive and fraudulent, which there are many companies out there who are intentionally defrauding their customers because it's a cheaper product that they can sell for higher profits. And it cannot and will not produce nitric oxide. And I think that's why these conversations are so important because all products, not just nitric oxide, have to be based on science. And it has to be personalized. And that's why I like the functional integrative docs because they have time to spend with their patients to get an insight into their lifestyle, their diet, what are their deficiencies, what are their toxin exposures, and then develop personalized therapies for them. But if you go to a standard allopathic doc, you got 5 minutes with it. And the simplest which is, you got ED, here's a sildenafil or Levitra.
Right. We'll give you some Viagra and see you later.
Or we'll give you an ACE inhibitor, an ARB for your hypertension. Here's some metformin for your diabetes. And here's Ambien because you can't sleep. And then you wake up and you're on a dozen different medications and people wonder why they're sick.
Right. So you mentioned, though, that you're developing drugs now. So how did you cross that bridge to get to the allopathic community and get them to agree to work with you on nitric oxide, and in other words, including nitric oxide in a pharmaceutical side of the medical world?
Well, I can tell you, it was never my intent going into academia to be a developer of dietary supplements. That was never even on my radar, right? But because we had developed a way to produce nitric oxide, and because I knew how to do this through natural products and through food and through modification of the microbiome and affecting the structure and function of the enzyme, we could do this through natural products and through dietary supplements. But the goal all along was to develop drug therapy, how to deliver nitric oxide in an outpatient setting. So we're not convincing the allopathic community to work with us because they can't, because we don't have an FDA drug approved on the market. So what we do is we go to the FDA, we have meetings with the FDA. So look, here's what we want to do. We want to go after ischemic heart disease. Here's our nitric oxide releasing drug that when we take this, we dilate the blood vessels, we relieve the ischemic pain known as angina, and we can prolong exercise-induced angina. And by the way, it works better than isosorbide dinitrate or nitroglycerin, and it's safer. So we convinced the FDA, we're going to design a clinical trial. We're going to test this in a double-blind placebo-controlled study. And if we hit our endpoints, the FDA agreed that they'll approve this drug. And then we've got a new drug indication for ischemic heart disease. We did the same thing with Alzheimer's. We go to the FDA, we go, look, Alzheimer's is a metabolic vascular disease. We're developing a nitric oxide releasing drug that improves glucose uptake, that improves the perfusion of the brain, overcomes focal ischemia. We don't get misfolding of proteins, and it addresses the root cause of dementia and Alzheimer's. So we're going to design a clinical trial. We're going to test it in a placebo-controlled randomized clinical trial. And if we hit these endpoints, will you agree to approve this drug based on the design of this study? And so we have to go to the FDA. We have to design clinical studies. We have to do the clinical studies. And these are tens of millions of dollars and take many, many years.
I was just about to say, this is very costly.
It's very costly, and I've intentionally avoided private equity money, venture capital money, because I don't want these people interfering with the science, because they're more interested in making money than advancing the science. And
exactly,
for me, I'm not doing this for the money. I've made enough money in my career to live happily ever after. So I can't be bought, and I will not be bought. But it's taken me a little bit longer because I have to self-fund these studies and go out and raise money from people, individuals who know what we're doing, who understand what we're doing, who understand the global impact. If we're successful, not if we're successful, when we're successful, how this is going to change the world. And we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it to do the right thing.
So I once asked you, because we talked about the baseline, how do you measure? And you said, okay, you look at the symptoms, but I wanted a more quantitative measurement when we first met each other. So I asked, Calroy, Ed Hoyt is a good friend of mine, and you know who they are, and I assume that they're doing the glycocalyx, and they have a nitric oxide product in the.
Well, I don't call it. They don't have a nitric oxide product. They get potassium nitrate in a capsule. Okay. Nitrate is not nitric oxide. And that's the record that I want to always keep straight.
Okay, sorry about that.
But they call it a nitric oxide product, but it's not a nitric oxide product.
But however, they use the strips, and I just had one right here, which I did right this morning, but I did it after I ate, and I realized you're supposed to do these on an empty stomach, and I didn't do it right. But this is the one that Ed sent me, and you said you developed those strips 25 years ago, and that you don't really use them as a measurement. So why is that? And if you wanted just a quickie, like, okay, how am I doing? And, I don't have any symptoms that you just described. I'm perfectly, seem perfectly fine. But I want to know, is this product that I take, which I take your lozenge every day, is this making a difference? And we are a kind of a quantitative.
No, for sure.
We always like to compete with each other and know what our score is, right? So this is one of the ways you do that. So what else? What can we do if you don't like?
I'll tell you the story, the backstory with those test strips. So when I launched my very first product technology, no one knew what nitric oxide was, and the number one question we had when we did market focus groups and market research was, how do I know if I need it? So the only way to do this, I mean, we could draw blood, and that's what we did in the research lab. And I've published over 100 peer-reviewed papers on mapping out these nitric oxide metabolites. But I thought, well, I can develop a salivary test strip. So in 2009, I developed the first and only non-invasive point-of-care diagnostic for nitric oxide. And it's that exact same chemistry that's on that test strip. Okay. We manufactured them, we launched them, I filed patents on it. And several years into, and by the way, it's very old chemistry. It's called the grease reaction. It's probably over 100-year-old known chemical reaction.
Okay.
So the chances of getting a patent on that chemistry was very low. So probably in 2012, 2013, when the bills were starting to come into the University of Texas on prosecuting that patent, and because we weren't making money on it, the university wasn't making money on it, we agreed, okay, let's abandon the patent because it's a tool, right? You can, if you know what you're measuring, it's a useful tool. If you don't know what you're measuring, it's a deceptive tool. And so number one, it is not a nitric oxide test strip. Now there's at least 3 or 4 companies out there selling my original salivary test strips because I abandoned the patent and they certainly can do it, but they're still using it. And so what they're measuring, it's not measuring nitric oxide. The chemistry is called the grease reaction. You put acidified sulfanilamide on that test strip, it reacts with nitrite in the saliva, and it forms a diazo compound that turns pink. It absorbs at 540 nanometers. So if it turns pink, it tells us that your saliva is enriched in nitrite. It's nothing to do with nitric oxide. But if you understand the metabolism, enterosalivary circuit, that what it's really measuring is, do you have the right oral bacteria? And if you're getting enough nitrate from your diet, are the bacteria in your mouth, on your tongue, converting that nitrate into nitrite? That's what we're detecting. But it's also detecting the immune response to an oral infection. So if you have an active oral infection, if you've got infected root canals, if you've got cavitations, if you've got oral dysbiosis, and there's an immune reaction occurring, our immune cells, macrophages, neutrophils, and monocytes produce nitric oxide. It's oxidized to nitrite in your saliva, and you're picking up a local immune response. So one of the reasons I abandoned that is because we would see people come in with high blood pressure, 10 years of erectile dysfunction. They were diabetic. They were obese. They had a fatty liver disease. And we'd say, here, use this test strip. And they would light it up like a Christmas tree.
Right.
You can see, I make plenty nitric oxide. And they go, no. We send them to a dentist. We do a 3D CT cone beam. He's eat up with oral infections.
Right.
And now we know that most people are walking around with asymptomatic infections.
Right.
And it's a false positive. And it's a very dangerous false positive. So that's why I tell people, if you understand what that's measuring, and now you can interrogate it. If you're low, they're on a false negatives. And that's really, if there's any utility to it, if you spit on it and it's low, you're low. You're nitric oxide deficient. Now, is it because you have endothelial dysfunction? Is it because you don't have the right oral bacteria? Is it because you're not getting enough nitrate from your diet? Is it because you take antacids or your stomach's not making stomach acid? Is it because you have a silane receptor transporter blockage in the salivary glands? Is it because you have Sjogren's syndrome? I mean, there's a laundry list of things that could explain why you're nitric oxide deficient. But then if you don't understand that, how do you fix it? Then these companies telling you you're low, but don't understand the physiology and biochemistry of why you're testing low. And they want to they think they can fix your problem based on that test strip. I mean, it would be humorous if it wasn't dangerous.
That's pretty amazing that you could get a bright pink result, think you're okay, you're great, and yet it's really an oral infection that's causing you to get this bright pink result. And that's
and then people just going about their business. They never go see a biological dentist to look deeper than an X-ray into a CT and realize they have an asymptomatic osteonecrotic infection going on that's going to cause enormous problems. Fibromyalgia, autoimmune disease, cancers. I mean, it's bad news.
So let's start from the top, okay? Starting at the head, because I want to go from the head to the toe, okay? So I'm probably starting with the biggest one of all, which is Alzheimer's, because it's the brain. But why don't you start there and say, explain how the influence of low nitric oxide can affect the result in the production of beta amyloid, or let's just say Alzheimer's or dementia.
Yeah. Well, there's a progression of this, right? It's called mild cognitive impairment.
Yeah.
It's called vascular dementia.
Yeah,
eventually Alzheimer's disease.
exactly.
So just like any disease, there's a progression. And so if you catch this early on, what we call it brain fog or MCI, mild cognitive impairment, if you look at cerebral blood flow, and you can do this through a functional MRI, you can do it through SPECT scans, which I like SPECT scans and Dr. Daniel Amen's work because it really tells us what parts of the brain are perfused and which are not. And so in these mild cognitive impairment, really any neurological disease, there's what's called focal ischemia. So if you look at a SPECT scan in dementia or Alzheimer's, the prefrontal cortex and parts of the brain don't show up on the SPECT scan. And that's because that part of the brain is not getting perfused. So it's called vascular dementia. Why? Because there's a vascular component to the dementia. There's loss of regulation of blood flow. Just like if you lose the regulation of blood flow to the sex organs, they fail. If you lose regulation of blood flow to the brain, it fails. And symptoms manifest depending upon which regions of the brain develop ischemia or hypoxia. And then number two, and you've heard this called Alzheimer's be called diabetes type 3. It's insulin resistance in the brain. So number one, if you're not getting oxygen and nutrients to the parts of the brain, and you can't get glucose into the cell for that cell to make ATP or cellular energy for that cell to do its job, you get misfolding of protein. And then what is that misfolded protein? Well, we call that tau tangle. We call it amyloid plaque. That's what shows up in the later stages. Right. So how do you fix it? You perfuse the brain. You give nitric oxide, you dilate the blood vessels. In 2011, my research group was the first group in the history of nitric oxide to show that nitric oxide is required for insulin signaling. For insulin to do its job, it binds to the insulin receptor, starts an intracellular signaling cascade, activates nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide activates GLUT4. GLUT4 goes to the membrane, brings glucose in. Without nitric oxide production, GLUT4 never gets the signal. You develop insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is a symptom of nitric oxide deficiency. So when we give nitric oxide to dementia patients, we dilate the blood vessels, we perfuse the brain, we show the improvement on SPECT scans and MRI, and we improve glucose uptake into the cell. So if we're delivering oxygen, delivering nutrients, activating mitochondria, getting glucose into the cell so the mitochondria can make cellular energy and ATP, the proteins do their job, the enzymes do their job, you don't get misfolding of proteins, there's no tau tangle, there's no amyloid plaque, and there's no loss of cognition. So that's why nitric oxide will be the cure to Alzheimer's. And that's why all drugs against Alzheimer's have failed, because amyloid plaque and tau tangles do not cause disease. They're the consequence of disease. And developing drug targets toward the consequence of any disease is a sure failure. And it's unfortunate that companies have spent billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer money chasing the wrong target.
I know. Dr. Dale Bredesen, who is the father of the natural cures to Alzheimer's, was on my podcast, and he said the exact same thing. You know, that they're just missing, what is it, $40 billion or something like that has been spent on Alzheimer's drugs with no success. That's like shameful. And I mean,
it's very predictable.
Sorry?
It's very predictable.
Yeah, I mean, but why have they ignored nitric oxide? I mean, it would be so easy to, with the current drugs, to now incorporate the knowledge that you're providing and the world, you know, of medicine is providing with nitric oxide. Why haven't they recognized that and done something about it?
Well, number one, these companies are for-profit companies, right? And I have a number of patents on ways that we deliver nitric oxide. Look, there's many ways to skin a cat. There's other technologies out there. But in big business, there is no money in cures, right? The money and the $1 trillion big pharma business is dependent upon monthly recurring revenue, getting people on drugs and keeping them on drugs for the rest of their life. No matter what business you're in, a for-profit business has two goals: get as many customers as you can and retain the customer for as long as you can. Yeah. And that's the big.
Well, I mean, the drug companies have the best business model that exists in the world, because they basically capture you. You know, you take one drug to help another drug that helps another drug, and you know, so basically, yeah. I mean, it's crazy because you're basically addicted to using pharmaceutical drugs, and it's a downward spiral. It's a big black hole.
No, as you mentioned, it's the best business model in the world, multi-trillion-dollar global economy. But what's the expense? The expense is our own health. and drugs have made it better.
Okay, so let's go to the nasal. The next, yep. I'm heading down south. Okay, right, so we're going to end up at erectile dysfunction, but I want to make sure we have time to do it. So, what about the nasal breathing and versus the mouth breathing? Well, how is that beneficial, and what can people do to change their habit?
Well, the same enzyme that's found in our endothelial cells that produces nitric oxide, the nitric oxide synthase enzyme, is also found in our upper airways, the epithelial cells. Yeah. So when we do nasal breathing, it activates these epithelial cells and turns on nitric oxide production. Okay. So now when we do nasal breathing, we're actually delivering nitric oxide gas into the pulmonary circulation. So we're dilating the pulmonary arteries. Now we're matching ventilation to perfusion, and we're improving tissue oxygenation. But it's also dilating the bronchioles. So nitric oxide is a smooth muscle relaxant. Relaxes the smooth muscles on the blood vessels, relaxes smooth muscles around the bronchioles. So now we're dilating the bronchioles, dilating the arteries, improving oxygenation. But if the enzyme is uncoupled and not functional, so if you have endothelial dysfunction, you have epithelial dysfunction. And we tested this. We take young, healthy individuals, do nasal breathing, we can detect nitric oxide out of the exhaled breath. We take a 50-year-old person with ED, do nasal breathing, there's no nitric oxide. So again, we have to focus on restoring the function of the NOS enzyme. Arginine isn't going to fix it. Beets aren't going to fix it. Citrulline isn't going to fix it. You have to understand the enzymology and biochemistry. Now, if you mouth breathe, not only are you bypassing that nitric oxide production pathway, but now you're completely oxygenating the oral cavity. You're changing the oral microbiome. You're acidifying the saliva. All the nitric oxide producing bacteria go away. All the pathogens come in. Now you have chronic halitosis. You have an acidic saliva. You have caries causing bacteria. You have periodontal disease causing bacteria. Porphyromonas gingivitis, all the really bad red pathogens you see on dental pathogens and start to show up, and you don't oxygenate at night. And so, 10-time increase in all-cause mortality through mouth breathing.
So that means what you do in the daytime, you have to be aware of that. But at night is when most people really are doing the wrong thing, which is mouth breathing. So do mouth taping, which I read about from a number of biological dentists that they're advocating that. So you can buy those, mouth tapes and use them. Are you advocating that as a methodology for sleep?
Well, first of all, I encourage anybody who's a mouth breather to go see an airway specialist, either an EMT, an ear, nose, and throat doctor, or a dentist who's an airway specialist, because you don't want a mouth tape if you get an anatomical obstruction.
That's right.
Because taping your mouth, you could literally suffocate. You have to have an airway for there to be oxygen exchange.
That's right. Good
Many
point.
people have anatomical issues. They have a small mouth,
right.
And they have an obstructed airway. So first, before you ever consider taping your mouth, go do an airway specialist and make sure you don't have an obstructive airway. But if you've got an open airway, mouth taping at night, I do it occasionally if I'm outside. I've got allergies and I feel a little snuffy.
Yeah.
But I've got an open airway, so I can do mouth taping, and you feel the difference of it the next morning.
Yeah, for sure. I started doing it a little bit, and it does make a difference in, I think, how deep you sleep. All right, so now next is the oral microbiome. Yeah. So can you give me a 1-minute description of how the nitric oxide influences the oral microbiome?
Well, the oral microbiome is influencing nitric oxide production. So we have what's called nitrate-reducing bacteria that reduce nitrate, 2-electron reduction to nitrite, and now we swallow our saliva and make nitric oxide. But without the bacteria, we lose the cardioprotective benefits of diet. We lose the cardioprotective benefits of exercise. So when we do things like have fluoride in our toothpaste, which kills all the bacteria in your mouth, when we use antiseptic mouthwash, which 2 out of 3 Americans use mouthwash every day, killing the bacteria, it shuts down nitric oxide production, and your blood pressure goes up. Blood pressure goes up, the number one driver, the number one killer of men and women worldwide. So, and we and others have published that if you destroy the microbiome, it's causal for high blood pressure. So if you're using mouthwash, you have to stop, use a fluoride-free toothpaste, and then start doing things that restore and support the microbiome instead of destroying it.
I'm so shocked when I go to these dentists. I have a regular hygiene, and they're more in tune to allopathic approaches. So they open up their cabinet at the end of the session, and they want to give you a goodie bag to take home. And It's fluoride toothpaste. It's chlorohexacin or whatever that mouthwash is. I mean, it's all the stuff that's so bad for you. And then when you do any kind of procedure, they want you to use an antibiotic, and that's the first thing they do when you walk in. Is they want it's like candy, and I always stuff them in my pocket. They think I'm taking it, but I never do. But these are the things that to be aware of. I mean, traditionally, the dentist you're going to go to, most people are not going to biological dentists. So you're going to be offered. And then we still have the government dealing with the fluoride in our water, and the toothpaste is just a byproduct of that. So it's a slippery slope. I mean, you have to navigate your own journey and make your own decisions. But if anybody that's watching today is still using mouthwash, alcohol-based mouthwash, throw it in the trash, right? Get rid of it. And even, what do you think about oil pulling? Is that okay? The coconut oil?
I think so. The short answer is we don't know because we've never done the experiment. But I don't think it's antiseptic. I think it's a good practice that many biological dentists recommend, but I don't see any downside to it. But we just don't have any.
Okay, so the next one down, I'm saying would be. He's telling me. Hold on. Okay, he's telling me we're out of time. Oh, shoot. Well, you know what, Nathan? We're going to have you back. I'm so sorry. I wanted to go down through all the the organs, and particularly the gut microbiome and the heart, of course, and and of course the erectile issue. But we'll make that happen at another session. Are you okay with doing another
Absolutely.
podcast?
And I love these conversations. These are very important conversations that people need to
know, and you're doing such an important thing for all of us, really. Before we go, I really want to just tell everybody, if you want to order, and everybody knows I'm not commercial, but when I take a product and I know the difference, I want to share it with other people. And I've been using, since I met you a little over a year ago, I've been using your N101, the lozenges. That's the only product I ever got, but I know you have many others. So go check out Nathan's website, and Tony's, our producer, is going to put it on the screen for everybody, and my assistant will have it in the show notes. So if you want to order any of his products, you can do so using my affiliate code with you, right? Which is gives you a 10%. So I will get you the code. I don't have it right with me today, but we will add that in so that people know how to get your product. So Nathan, thank you so much. And I'm really sorry I have to cut it short, but I loved I think we covered a lot of ground today, and it's very, very compelling information. So what you're doing is you're on a mission, and you have not deterred from your path. You are an evangelist of nitric oxide, and I truly, as one individual, I truly appreciate your passion. So thank you again. And everybody, check out Top Doctor Magazine coming up in about another week or so. Okay, take care.
Thank you.